My family threw me a birthday party just to steal my $12 million inheritance. I surprised them all. Hi, my name is Madison, I am 28 years old, I live in Chicago, and I work in senior financial consulting. People often call me the balanced one, the person who stays strong when the whole family starts to fall apart. And I guess it's true. I was the one who paid for my brother's tuition after he lost his scholarship because he was partying. I was the one who took on more than $60,000 of debt that my father had racked up in suspicious investments. And I was also the one who silently covered all my mother's credit card payments, even though she never once asked how I was doing. I used to tell myself, family is family, no matter what, you have to keep trying. But over time, that definition began to suffocate me. Last week, I received a message from my mother. Dear Madison, come home at 6 p.m. tonight, we have something special for you. For some reason, my fingers froze over the screen. Something special from my mother, Ellen, usually meant trouble. The last time she said something like that, the whole family gathered to convince me to sign as a co-signer for a loan for Hunter's new startup, just a few months after his previous company had gone bankrupt. I parked in front of the 2-story house on the outskirts, the one I helped pay for 4 years ago. Of course, it's in my parents' name. Through the warm yellow light of the windows, I could see people moving and hear muffled laughter. I got out of the car, adjusted my coat, and rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, fully made up, bright red lips and eyes shining a bit too much. Surprise, she shouted, pulling me inside. The living room was full of relatives I hadn't seen since Christmas 2 years ago, Uncle Henry, Aunt Joan, and even my cousin Daphne, who only shows up when there are gifts or money involved. They all shouted in unison, "Happy early birthday, Madison." I smiled, pretending to be surprised. Wow, how exciting. You really surprised me, I said, although what I felt was distrust. My mother led me to the sofa in the middle of the room, and my father quickly offered me a cocktail. Your favorite, green apple gin. He was grinning from ear to ear. However, I had hated gin since I was 25. Sit down, darling, said my mother softly, though I noticed her eyes glancing at the side table where a leather folder was carefully placed, as if it were waiting. I sat down and glanced at the first page. Asset Assignment Contract, Lewis Bennett Trust Fund. I tilted my head. What is this, Mom? Oh, just some boring paperwork, she replied quickly, placing her hand on mine. We'll go over it later, honey. Today is for celebrating. I smiled, but my hand was already reaching for the documents. Actually, I'd like to look at it now, if you don't mind. Suddenly, the room went silent. My father stood up, awkwardly raising his glass. A toast to Madison, the brightest star in the family, he said somewhat hurriedly. I opened the first page. My eyes stopped at a sentence. I, Madison Claire Bennett, hereby renounce all rights to the Lewis Bennett Trust Fund. I looked at my mother. Mom, what does this mean? She forced a smile. It's just a formality, dear. It's for tax reasons. Tax reasons? Or to transfer everything to the family without telling me? I asked calmly, without breaking eye contact. Madison, Hunter interrupted, please, just sign it. Everyone's already agreed. I laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. So this is what the surprise party was for. My mother clasped her hands, the smile fading. Don't make a scene, the whole family is here. I closed the folder and placed it on my lap, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. They deserved the truth. I looked around the room, at familiar faces that suddenly felt so strange, and I knew that tonight would mark the beginning of something completely different. I was still sitting there, in the same living room I once knew so well, but now it felt like someone else's house. The air was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. The folder was still on my lap, the leather cover slightly bent where my fingers had pressed into it. No one said a word. Every gaze had something in common, they all avoided mine. Hunter was staring at the floor, his fingers tightly interlocked. Daphne was typing on her phone as if any notification was more important than this. My mother, Ellen, still held that forced smile. But I could see the worry in her eyes. I turned to my father, even he looked uncomfortable. Dad? Mom? why are you doing this? If this really was about Grandma's inheritance, why didn't you talk to me? Tell me the truth. My mother cleared her throat and stepped closer, her voice sweet but sharp. Darling, I know you always worry too much, but this is no big deal. I thought that if the inheritance was under our administration, it would be more convenient. You really don't need more money, right? You already have everything. I let out a dry laugh. More convenient for who, Mom? Why set a trap for me at a party you call a surprise? I thought I was part of the family, not a financial asset. A deep voice spoke from a corner. Lauren, enough. You're making everyone uncomfortable, seriously. It was my Uncle Ray. I turned to him. Then I guess I should apologize for not signing away my last legal tie to my grandmother. My best friend Reagan came to my side. I hadn't even noticed she was there, but now she was, her gaze steady, ready if I needed her. Lauren, snapped my mother, the smile now completely gone. Don't create a scene. I stood up, holding the folder with 2 fingers as if it could stain me. The thing is, Mom, you wrote the script, and I, unfortunately, refused to play the part. I walked over to the dining table, gently placed the folder down, and then looked, one by one, at everyone present. Grandma Louise left me everything because she knew. And tonight, you've all proven she was absolutely right. Silence. I turned to Reagan. We're leaving. She nodded, but before I reached the door, my mother shouted, if you don't sign, there will be consequences, Loren. I turned around and looked her straight in the eyes. I've lived with consequences my whole life, Mom. Now I choose clarity. And I walked out of that house without tears, without rage, but with awareness. Reagan's car moved silently down the street, lit with golden lights. I leaned back in the seat, my heart still pounding from what had just happened. Are you okay? She asked softly. Not yet, but I will be, I replied, looking out the window. Reagan stayed quiet for a moment and then murmured, your grandmother surely saw this coming. I nodded. Yes, I think she left something else, not just money. Maybe a video, a letter, a way to expose them. Reagan gently squeezed my hand. Now it's your turn. I squeezed back and nodded. Tomorrow I'll see my grandmother's lawyer. We stopped at a small cafe by the lake, where golden lights flickered over the rippling water like a sheet of glass. Reagan placed 2 cups of hot tea on the table while I pulled out the folder my mother had tried to make me sign. I went through the pages again, more carefully, making sure I missed nothing. It wasn't just the renunciation of the inheritance. There was also attached a temporary power of attorney and a financial reassignment sheet that made it clear that nearly 100% of my grandmother's assets would be transferred to a new fund managed by my parents. Reagan looked at me, her expression darkening. They weren't planning to give you a single dollar. I nodded. And even more, they planned to use my name to make it all look legal. If I signed, I would basically be handing them the keys. She bit her lip thoughtfully. And your grandmother's lawyer? You said you would call him. I pulled out my phone and opened the last message Grandma Louise had sent me just a week before she passed away. Dear Loren, if things ever get confusing, go see my lawyer, Mr. Gerald Price. I left some things for you. I called the office first thing the next morning. A woman with a professional voice answered and scheduled an appointment for 10 o'clock. I arrived 10 minutes early, my heart racing. The office was in a classic red brick building in downtown Boston, with large windows overlooking the park. Gerald Price was a calm man, with silver hair, around 60 years old. He greeted me with a firm handshake and invited me into a room filled with law books. On the desk was a thick envelope with my name, carefully sealed. Mrs. Louise left a private video recording for you, he said, opening a drawer and pulling out a USB drive. She also left additional documents related to the original fund that your family is trying to restructure. I took a deep breath. The video, can I watch it now? He nodded and connected the drive to his computer. The screen lit up, and a familiar voice filled the room. It was slow, warm, a little fragile with age, but still sharp. Loren, if you're watching this, then things are unfolding exactly as I feared. I sat up straighter, my eyes fixed on the screen. You have always been kind, I'm the only granddaughter who never asked for anything, and that's why I want to protect you. I saw how your mother treated others, even me, using family as a pretext to take advantage, all in the name of sacrifice. I left everything to you not because you needed it, but because you deserve it. My hands clenched, my eyes burned. The screen shifted to the original terms of the trust. It clearly stated that if anyone attempted to force the heiress to renounce her rights, all assets would automatically be redirected to the charitable organizations she had named. Your family doesn't know about this clause, Mr. Price explained, but if you wish, I can activate it today. I looked at him. And this video, can I keep a copy? Of course, he replied, handing me another USB drive. There is also another recording, it's meant for your family. I took the device, my heart beating with a mix of anger and relief. But then I started to form a plan. I think it's time the whole family watches this video together. On the way back, I told everything to Reagan. When I mentioned the video, her eyes lit up. You're going to show them? I nodded. Tonight I'll hold a small gathering at my apartment. So, their surprise party will become their own surprise. I smiled, and this time, I was the one writing the script. When everyone was present, I would play the video in front of them. And if anyone still tried something shady, the clause that donated 100% to charity remained in force. They had no idea. But I understood better than ever that the ones being tested were them. That afternoon, I sent a brief message. Mom, I've thought about it. Tomorrow I'm inviting everyone to my apartment at 5 p.m. I want to settle everything peacefully. The response came immediately. Darling, I knew you'd come around. I'm so glad. We'll all be there. I didn't even need to analyze it. I knew my mother, Ellen Langston, would never refuse a meeting where she thought she could win. Reagan helped me rearrange the living room. I borrowed a mini projector from the office and placed it on a shelf opposite the sofa. The wall would serve as a clean, clear screen. I took one last look at the room and placed the USB with Grandma Louise's message next to the computer. My heart was racing, but not from fear, because I knew that after this day, nothing would ever be the same. At 5 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. My mother came in first, wearing a beige dress, her hair carefully styled, and heels that echoed as if she were walking a runway. Where is Madison? She asked as soon as she crossed the threshold, calling me by my middle name, something she only did when she wanted to remind me, I gave birth to you. I'm the one who invited everyone, I replied calmly. Come in. My father entered next, followed by Uncle Ray, Aunt Linda, and Hunter, who looked visibly nervous. I offered them seats and then walked over to the projector. I would like to show you something, I announced in a low but clear voice, enough to silence the room. I connected the USB drive. The image lit up, and there was Grandma Louise, her silver hair elegantly tied back, her gaze piercing, and her voice as comforting as those summer afternoons when I used to listen to her stories as a child. If you're watching this, it means Loren refused to sign what they brought her. I heard a slight movement from where my mother was sitting, but she said nothing. I have established a trust that cannot be modified. Everything I left belongs to Loren, the only granddaughter who never demanded, never manipulated, never disappointed me. Hunter looked down. My mother shifted in her seat. My father stared at the screen in disbelief. This trust has 3 clear conditions. 1. It can only be used for personal expenses such as housing, health, and education. 2. It can be invested in independent projects with no family ties. 3. It can be donated to recognized charitable organizations. I looked at my mother. She stared back, not with anger, but with panic. If any family member tries to coerce Loren into giving up her inheritance or sues to claim it, 50% of the funds will be immediately transferred to the 4 NGOs I have designated. Silence. I turned off the projector. I know yesterday you planned for me to sign everything, but I also know that's not what Grandma wanted. And I'm no longer the naive girl you could manipulate. My mother stood up, her voice trembling. You're overreacting. Everything I did was for you. Really? I asked softly. For me? Or because you were afraid that if I managed the inheritance, you would lose access to my money to solve your problems? My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Loren. This is family, we share everything. I looked him straight in the eyes. I've shared enough. This time, I'm keeping what's mine. I took a copy of the trust conditions from the envelope and placed it in the center of the table. Grandma saw this coming. And if anyone in this family still plans to violate that trust, know that every action brings its consequence. My mother clutched her purse, her gaze distant. You'll regret this. One day, you'll need us. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But today I need something else, respect. And I'm not trading it for any amount of money. Then I opened the door. This meeting is over. My apartment returned to silence, but this time, it didn't feel lonely, it felt peaceful. I looked at the USB on the table. It didn't just contain a will, it held the trust my grandmother had placed in me to make my own decisions and to feel worthy of them. And if they still tried to turn the situation around, they would find that I already had my next move prepared. The next morning, I sat alone in my small kitchen, next to a cup of cold coffee. Grandma Louise's USB was still in my pocket, but in my hands was a thick folder that the lawyer Gerald had given me after our first meeting. Your grandmother was very thorough, he told me as he handed me documents clearly labeled year by year. She had kept records of every financial transaction involving your family, from credit cards opened in your name in college to money transfers disguised as medical expenses. I don't know how long I spent flipping through each page, bank statements, transcripts of recordings, but when I closed the last page, I knew something. This time, I wasn't just defending myself, I was exposing the truth. 2 days later, I called my father to meet, just him, without my mother or Hunter. We met in a quiet cafe in Brookline, where he used to take me for pancakes when I was little. But this time, there would be no family breakfast, only a reckoning. My father, Richard Langston, arrived 10 minutes late, walking in with an awkward smile. Sorry, there was traffic. But thanks for seeing me. I nodded, pointed to a chair, and placed a thick envelope on the table. I didn't call you here to reconcile. I called you to make a few things clear. He looked at the envelope, frowning. What is this? I slid the envelope toward him. Documents. Loans you took out in my name. Credit cards Mom opened but charged to my student account. And records of the times you said the money was to help Hunter, but it ended up in Mom's personal account in Florida. He let out a nervous laugh. You're misunderstanding everything, Lauren. It was for the family. Everyone does it. I looked at him directly. For the family? Do you know that when I was 21, I worked 3 jobs to pay off that credit card debt while you were in Atlantic City gambling? His face went still. I continued, my voice calm. Remember when Mom called me crying, saying Hunter had an accident and needed $8,000 for surgery? I pulled out a printed bank statement. 2 hours later, that money went to a dealership in Miami, where he bought a used Range Rover at a good price. How did you find out about that? He stammered. I slid another paper, a transcript of the conversation with the dealer. Grandma kept it. She knew. She always knew. My father leaned back, running a hand over his face. For the first time, he wasn't the confident man I remembered. He looked like someone losing control of the game. What do you want? He asked, dropping the act of calm. I crossed my arms. I don't want money or apologies. Just this, enough. He narrowed his eyes. From now on, neither you nor Mom touch a cent of my inheritance. No more calls asking for help. No more fake emergencies. No more accidentally transferring money to Hunter's account. I leaned toward him, firm. If anyone in this family tries to access the trust again, I will press charges. I have everything ready to send to the IRS or the Financial Crimes Unit. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. And one more thing. I know you're planning to hire another lawyer to contest the will, but the clause in the trust is very clear. If there's coercion or legal action, 50% of the assets go straight to charity. I stood, gathering my documents. So if you want to call Mom to make plans, go ahead. But know that every misstep will cost you half. He looked at me, weighing whether I was serious. I smiled slightly. didn't you teach me how to play chess? Sacrifice the pawn to protect the queen? Looks like you picked the wrong piece this time. I walked out of that cafe without looking back, and for the first time in years, my steps felt light. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about taking back control of my own life, something they never imagined I would do. Monday morning. I arrived at the office of the lawyer, Gerald Price, at 8:45. The family meeting was scheduled for 9, and I wanted to be the first to arrive, not out of courtesy, but to make sure everything was ready. The conference room was perfectly prepared, the projector tested, and the bound documents placed neatly on the table. On the screen, frozen, was the first image of the final video that Grandma Louise had recorded. Her face serious, eyes resolute behind her glasses. Gerald entered carrying another thick folder. Everything is in order, just as you requested. All the financial evidence is printed and clearly labeled. I nodded. Perfect. No formalities. When they arrived, promptly at 9, the door opened. My mother Ellen came in first, followed by my father Richard and Hunter. They were dressed as if for a business meeting, my mother in a dark gray blazer, my father with his red tie, his famous power tie. Hunter said nothing, hands in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. Gerald began, "Thank you for arriving on time. We are here to watch the final video left by Mrs. Louise Olson and to inform you of the final terms of the inheritance and the company's assets." My mother let out a little laugh. "I hope this time the video isn't as theatrical as that little surprise you showed us at your house." I didn't respond, I just pressed play. The screen lit up, and Grandma's voice echoed, firm and clear. "If you are watching this, it means everything has happened just as I imagined. Ellen, Richard, I know everything you've done, undeclared withdrawals and use of company funds for personal expenses. Every transaction, every bank statement, every falsified report is documented." My mother's face turned pale. My father looked at Gerald, as if expecting him to stop the video. "I have transferred full ownership of Langston and Hartley, the company I co-founded with my husband, to Lauren. She is the only one in this family who has not used our name to enrich herself, who has not lied, nor masked greed under the guise of family loyalty." Hunter looked up, stunned. My mother jumped to her feet. "This is unacceptable. That company is my father's legacy. And now it belongs to the only person who still honors that legacy," I said, standing up. "I am the legal heir, and here is the property transfer, signed and registered." I placed the transfer agreement and registration documents Gerald had prepared in front of them. "This is illegal," shouted my father, pounding the table. "I'm still the acting CEO, I have rights." "You have rights until you are forcibly removed," I interrupted, "and that is already in process. Here is your resignation letter. If you refuse to sign, all the financial records, including the embezzled company funds, will be sent to the SEC for investigation." I slid another folder across. Inside were proofs of payments made to Riverfront Casino under a false name and invoices from the luxury hotel where my mother held her weekend conferences. No one said a word. Gerald added, "Furthermore, if anyone attempts to interfere in this transfer or threatens the heir, the asset protection clause of the trust will be activated, transferring half the value of the inheritance to organizations that aid victims of financial abuse." I looked at my mother. "You used to say I was too sensitive. You were wrong. I was just too patient." My father's hand trembled as he picked up the resignation letter. "If I sign this, will you stay quiet? I don't want to damage the family's name." "I have no interest in destroying anyone," I replied. "But if you keep trying to manipulate me, I won't hesitate to bring the truth to light." Richard looked at my mother. She said nothing, pale, her lips tightly pressed. Finally, he signed. I gathered the papers and gave them one last glance. From now on, all shared family assets will be independently audited. All secondary credit cards are cancelled. The company apartment is reclaimed. Discretionary funds are frozen. Hunter murmured, "Lauren, this has gone too far." I turned to him. "No, Hunter, this should have ended a long time ago. Today, I'm just rewriting the story, with the truth." The conference room door closed softly behind me, no slamming, no drama. But I knew that to them, that sound echoed louder than any final word. And I didn't look back. I didn't need to. 2 weeks after that decisive meeting, I officially became the new CEO of Langston and Hartley, the company my grandmother Louise had helped build from scratch with my great-grandfather, when it was just a small law firm in Cambridge. Today, it is one of the most respected investment consultancies in New England. And I, the granddaughter they once saw only as the accountant, now occupied the top-floor office where my father's name had been for over 20 years. I didn't change much of the office's appearance, just replaced the old portrait of my father on the wall with a painting of my grandmother, a forest path illuminated by the last light of day. I think she would have liked that. But I didn't stop at taking the reins of the company. I did something more, something I believe was my grandmother's unspoken wish. I founded the Louise Olson Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing financial education to young people and counseling for those suffering from financial manipulation by family members. Most of the foundation's budget comes from 20% of the company's profits, something I included in a resolution approved by the board. Though it surprised them at first, I knew that once they understood the purpose, they would accept it. That afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. "Loren, it's Mom. Your father just got out of the hospital. We need to talk." I waited a few minutes before replying. Friday at 3 p.m., in my office. They arrived on time. My mother was as well dressed as ever, though she looked tired. My father looked visibly aged, his face gaunt after a recent mild heart failure. The arrogance was gone, perhaps replaced by the weariness of so many failed plans. "Loren," my mother began, "we didn't come to ask you for money. We just want to hear you, clearly." I sat across from them. 2 small envelopes rested on the table. "I don't intend to exclude you forever, but I can't keep being the family's financial lifeline." I slid the envelopes toward them. Inside were lists of independent financial counseling centers and a treatment program for gambling and compulsive spending. "I'm willing to pay for all of this, if you're truly ready for a new beginning. But I won't sign another check to cover bad decisions." My mother hesitated. "Do you think we're bad people?" I gently shook my head. "I think you are people who never learned to set boundaries. And worse, you never let me set mine." My father spoke softly. "I've made mistakes, not just once, but many times. But seeing you here, strong and in control, maybe that was the smartest thing your grandmother ever did." I didn't respond, not because I wasn't moved, but because I had learned not to base my future on someone else's remorse. They left in silence, no hugs, no more requests. That night, I returned to the foundation's office, where a group of university students was preparing a seminar on how to recognize financial abuse within families. I stayed at the back, observing quietly. No one realized I was the founder, and I liked it that way. Reagan arrived late, bringing 2 bubble teas. "It seems Hunter's younger sister signed up to volunteer." I smiled. "Good. At least the next generation still has hope." She handed me a draft of the foundation's website. "What do you want to put in the About Us section?" I paused a moment and wrote, "We believe that family should never be a place where you fear for your finances, and that true love has no price." Reagan nodded, her eyes glowing. "Perfect. Your grandmother would be proud." I looked out the window, where the city lights sparkled like Christmas. For the first time in years, I didn't feel that conflict between gratitude and guilt. I no longer owed anything to anyone. And I was finally living a life that was entirely mine. I used to think that blood ties were sacred and unbreakable, that no matter how many times you got hurt, you kept forgiving because it was family. But the truth is, some ties exist only to drag you down. And if you're never brave enough to let them go, you'll stay trapped in an endless cycle of self-sacrifice. That autumn, as a blanket of golden leaves covered the path leading to Langston and Hartley's headquarters, I stepped into a new chapter. No more emergency calls, no more disguised messages about money, no more guilt every time I said no to someone who once called me the good girl. Each time I refused, I felt freer. I lived in a modest apartment near Boston Common, nothing extravagant, but cozy enough that each night, when I came home, I didn't feel lost. On my bookshelf were new photos, me, Reagan, and the first team of the foundation on a field visit in Vermont, Hunter and me sharing the stage for the first time during the company's restructuring announcement, me and myself, smiling in the mirror without pretending. One night, after a seminar on how to break toxic ties in blood relationships, Reagan sat beside me, holding a cup of hot tea in her hands. "Do you think if your mother called again, you'd answer?" I stayed silent for a moment, then shook my head. "Not because I'm angry, but because I've understood something. Every time I open that door, I give them another chance to take away what took me years to reclaim, my peace." Reagan nodded, her gaze lost in the soft glow of the ceiling lights. "Your family didn't lose you because of money. They lost you because they never knew how to hold on to someone they thought would never leave." Her words stayed with me into the next day, when I was invited to give a talk to young people who had been hurt by their own families. I stepped up to the podium without a grand speech, just a few notes and a truth I no longer hid. "My name is Lauren, and maybe the first thing I want to tell you is that you are not selfish for choosing to protect yourselves." The room went silent. I continued, "I used to be my parents' wallet, the successful one. But behind closed doors, there were midnight calls and emotional blackmail. If you don't help us, what will become of us?" I gave more than money. I gave my trust, my time, and my youth to maintain something they called family peace. But I learned that peace built on guilt never lasts. I looked toward the first row, where Hunter sat quietly. He gave me a slight nod, a silent approval. And then I understood that true family isn't always the one who gives you life, but the one who stays when you dare to live fully. That could be a friend from college, a coworker who shares their lunch, or yourself, who stood up, not for others, but for you. As I stepped down from the stage, many in the audience stood and applauded, not because I was the hero, but because one day I chose to cut the ropes so I could start again. That night, I stayed alone in the foundation's office, watching as the streetlights dimmed. On the desk was the last handwritten letter from my grandmother, never made public. "Dear Lauren, if the day ever comes when you must choose between keeping your family or keeping yourself, remember that true family will never ask you to lose yourself. Choosing yourself is not abandoning anyone, it is the only way to be whole and to truly give. And if you must go, walk toward peace." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Peace wasn't something given to me, it was something I learned to build. And for the first time in my life, I knew with certainty, I don't need anyone's permission to be happy. Lauren's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is set boundaries, even with our own family. Blood does not equal goodness, and true love imposes no conditions. In a world where so many are manipulated under the pretense of family obligation, Lauren chose to live by her values, rebuilding her life on truth and self-love. She proved that happiness does not come from pleasing others, but from having the courage to be honest with yourself. What do you think about Lauren's decision? Would you have done the same in her place? Leave your comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more touching family stories.